elections is Republican strategist Gianno Caldwell. And I want to know, where is the media coverage of the unifying efforts of conservatives and judicial reforms and all that good stuff that lift us all, especially the African-American community, that hound all over the bad stuff and the division? But why is this?
Well, thank you for having me, Governor Palin. And I would say the media outlet that's covering it right now is you, so kudos to you for that. You know, in general, the liberal media would rather not display anything that's going to be put out by the conservative movement, the Republican Party, especially considering the fact that it doesn't fit within their agenda. Their agenda is to divide, to be divisive, and to sensationalize things that are going on in our country right now.
Well, your perspective on this is very valuable. You're there on the front lines, and you're there in the heat of a bunch of battles. You wrote a recent article about this, an article that within you mentioned how the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, which was pushed by both Clintons at the time, authored by then Senator Joe Biden, that has done major damage to the black community. How has that law hurt the cause of unity?
Well, Governor Palin, I'll tell you, the black community has suffered poverty. They've suffered unemployment. They've suffered generational dependency on government assistance. They suffered a whole host of issues. And this law, to be perfectly honest, it stems from this law. I'll tell you, there's over 2 million people in the prison system right now. 60% of those folks are African Americans. The Democratic Party pushed this bill, and they literally designed the prison industrial complex from this bill. And let me tell you why, because Governor Palin, I know you like facts. The fact of the matter is, within this law, $10 billion was used to develop prisons all over this country. I know you like facts, so let me give you another fact. This law created, or rather applied, the mandatory minimum sentencing laws to nonviolent, low-level criminal activity. And let me give you one last one. This particular law also gave states incentives to enact what is known as Truth in Sentencing Act laws, that would apply and keep folks that went to jail in prison. In addition to that, it provided no funding to rehabilitate those that were in prison. You're talking about education programs, you're talking about job programs. So when they left prison, what did they do? They went and did something else to get arrested. And it was a cycle, and that's what you're experiencing with the black community right now.
That is a great point, and more on that. You mentioned that the GOP is taking action on that other interest of African Americans, and the left isn't, and that's criminal justice reform. What kind of reforms are you seeing and hearing taking shape there on Capitol Hill?
And you know what, Governor Palin, I'm a federal lobbyist, so I only had the opportunity to learn about some of these things, not from the press, because that's not what they're reporting. I've learned about these things from personal discussions with folks. A good example was Senator Tim Scott. He just introduced legislation that would provide funding for body cameras throughout this country. So any municipality, police department that wishes to have body cameras so they can make sure they're protecting themselves and the citizens around them, they can use that. And I tell you what, there was a study done which showed that 90% of complaints against police officers, there was a reduction of 90% after officers were wearing body cameras. Senator John Cornyn, he produced a bill recently that would provide for funding for job training programs, drug rehabilitation for those that are currently in prison, education as well. These are good things. Senator Lee of Utah, he came out with something that's going to pretty much take the harm in which we've seen with the Biden-Clinton law that the Democrats pushed out in 1994. He's going to reduce the time that the minimum mandatory amount of time that folks would experience for nonviolent, low-level criminal offenses.
You are, as I say, real bold. People are listening to you, including, Donald Trump read your great piece, Why the Republican Base Has a Tie to Trump That Won't Break. And I know he sent you a thank you note, and he's mentioned this. I'd be dishonest if I told you that I memorized your whole op-ed there, but I bet you our viewers would want to know more about what you said in that op-ed.
Well, in addition to being a federal lobbyist and a Republican strategist, I'm also a contributor with the Hill newspaper publication. For folks that are interested, they can go and read any of the pieces that I've written online. But this particular piece, I was kind of surprised that Mr. Trump, or the Donald as I like to call him, sent me a note, which was this past Tuesday, because it wasn't a glaring piece on him, but it was a piece just stating the facts. Donald Trump has done something that's particularly amazing, especially for folks that's been around like myself. Political experts don't understand it. Donald Trump has taken the political correct nature in which our society has been shaped in, and he said, look, I'm just going to tell you like it is. And that tell it like it is nature has done something that people gravitate towards, the Republican base and others. It has caused them to lose business deals. Some would estimate into the hundreds of millions of dollars, or rather $100 million. So with what has happened, he hasn't backed down like many would. You'll see politicians, once they see that they're losing money, they back away. You see business leaders do the same. He didn't do that. He doubled down. He went in, and he's continuing to go in. So I appreciate him for that.
Yeah, I think that you and the Donald and a few others in that race, you guys have that in common. And I know that you're as sick of the elites politically correct.
Dr. Ben Carson being one of them, too.
Amen. Yeah, he's great. The politically correct culture, that's reshaping us from a free, brave nation to a stifled, wussified nation. Try to give our One America News viewers some hope here.
Well, you know what? And I think it goes back to your last question about Donald Trump. Politically correct speech is taking our country in a direction that's very dangerous. It's a place that we should never go in. There should never be a point where I say that I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman because that's what I was taught. That's what the Bible has taught me, that I'm going to be called a bigot or any of those nasty names. Donald Trump is taking this thing to another level, and there's other leaders that were doing it before him, and there's other leaders like Jeb Bush who's beginning to do it now. Dr. Ben Carson was doing it, and he was up in the polls before Donald Trump got involved. So I think that we're going in a very good direction, and I'm hopeful that it'll continue that way.
You are a good man, and you just keep giving us those facts. Nothing but the facts, man.
Thank you
so much. Thanks, Mr. Caldwell.